Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Good afternoon. Welcome to SmartCon. I'm really excited about this panel today about tokenized assets because it seems like recently everyone's been talking about tokenized assets. I mean, I think we can all sort of see it as the final boss, right? Instead of just playing around with purely digital native assets, we're bringing off-chain assets on-chain. And what makes me really excited about this is that we're joined today by people who aren't just talking about it, but they're building it, and they've deployed tokenized assets. So please give another round of applause to welcome Charlie from RWXYZ, Cynthia from Matrixport, Erwin from Backed Finance, and Nick from Fortunify. Thank you. So let's jump right into it, because I think we need to set some context. So we'll go down the line, Charlie, starting with you. Why don't you explain a little bit about what you're building at RWXYZ, and then help give a definition of what are these tokenized assets that everyone's talking about?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Michael. And I think what we're building is the dominant data platform and analytics provider for tokenized assets. So if you ever want to learn, answer the questions, how many tokenized assets are there? What sectors are they in? Who holds them? Who's originating them? Those are all questions that our site, rwa.xyz, aims to answer. And we think that tokenized assets are the technological endgame for all asset ownership, asset settlement, and that it's the real first sea change in asset ownership since the advent of digital finance in general. And that presents a great opportunity for a data provider to come in and show everyone all of the information that's needed for all financial workflows.
Thanks. Cynthia?
Yes, so earlier this year, Matrixport has launched our RWA brand called Matrix Stock. And the first product we tokenize in real asset is called short-term treasury bill token, which is essentially the token representation of a US treasury bill, which largely comprises of overnight reverse repo and short-term treasury that's shorter than, with a tenor shorter than 3 months.
Thanks. Erwin?
Yeah, hi. I'm from Backed. We bring real-world assets on chain as well, such as US T-bills, but also equities like S&P 500 or Coinbase shares. Yeah, excited to be here.
Thanks.
Excellent. Hey, everybody. My name's Nick. I'm the founder at Fortunify. We are launching just now in October a cross-chain tokenization protocol that allows you to mint and redeem different public and private debt assets on multiple different chains. And we're starting off on Canto, and we'll be on several other chains over the course of the year. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, everyone. So now we know a little bit more what you're working on, what tokenized assets are. Why don't we get into what's the big opportunity or use cases for these tokenized assets, and really, how can the current DeFi landscape benefit from this? And Erwin, I'd love to kick this off with you, because I know there's already some protocols using B assets.
That's right. I mean, so part of our growth strategy is to embed ourselves in DeFi. So we have a few of these protocols currently already using our tokens. First one was Ribbon, now Avo. Then came Angle, and finally Bloom. But what I was going to say was that actually DeFi, like real-world asset, already like dominate DeFi. When you think about USDC, which is the main asset, is a tokenized asset. So yeah, it's already the case.
Yeah, and Cynthia, I'd love to hand it over to you next. How are you seeing STBT being used in DeFi?
Yeah, so I think it's very important for us is to find a lot of use cases for SDBT in various DeFi protocols. So there's a few areas we're seeing the interest of collaboration. One is to use SDBT as a trading collateral on the centralized exchanges or decentralized exchanges. The other one is to bring liquidity to the SDBT by potentially accept it as a lending protocol in some of the big lending protocols. The third one is basically use SDBT, which is a very raw version of off-chain yield to make on-chain money market fund or other yield-bearing assets on-chain. So that's the three areas I have seen so far, and potentially could be also be used as an ingredient, a collateral for yield-bearing stablecoins. That's also some of the new initiatives we have seen so far. Yeah.
Cool. Nick, Charlie, anything we missed on use cases or how DeFi could be using tokenized assets right now?
I guess just to add a little bit on both of your points, on the point of USDC, right, it is already an asset that is KYC'd and AML'd for minting and redemption. It's openly transferable, which is broadly a bit of a differentiator, but the concept of USDC really being a derivative of a treasury that is not passing on any yield to its users, and then imagining what distribution in DeFi looks like with underlying T-bills as collateral with a real base yield, and then being able to do different network distributions on top of that, I think is just a really big opportunity that we're going to see a lot of different integrations and opportunities around that over the next 6 to 12 months. I was also going to add on the stablecoin point that Cynthia was making. We've seen MakerDAO be one of the first that really onboarded a significant amount of RWA assets. Fortunify, small plug, was one of the first RWA assets that backed DAI. We brought revenue-based financing assets to back DAI. But what we're seeing now is a adoption of existing protocols that want to onboard these assets and a significant amount of development around new protocols that are being built to custom support these assets and enable more distribution from that as well. So I think really RWA as a utility on chain is where this is really going to hyperscale.
One of the things I want to add to all these points, I think everyone here covered what is the use case for DeFi participants, covered that extremely well, and that's extra collateral and being able to provide real-world yield into the DeFi ecosystem for on-chain players. But another perspective I want to highlight is the advantages that tokenization brings to traditional finance, and that is mostly for, and really this is goes to the topic of our talk here, bringing 100 trillion on-chain, and really traditional finance players for some instruments like securitizations or even more esoteric structures can save 50 bips, 100 bips over the current systems that are happening now. I mean, you think of all the intermediaries that are in play, the end game of everything that we're doing here in DeFi is to eliminate a lot of those intermediaries, and in doing so can save 50 bips, 100 bips off of trillions, hundreds of trillions, quadrillions to Sergey's point of value, and see changes in technology have happened for far less money than what's at stake here.
Thanks. Yeah, you know what? I want to take a step back, maybe and take a macro view of this, because I've been saying tokenized assets. We said RWAs here. I know real-world assets is sort of a funny term because it's not only so broad, but then it implies that, say, digital assets like Bitcoin, Ethereum are not real, which I think a lot of people at this conference will disagree with. So Charlie, I'm going to bring this back to you since you see a lot of these things. What are the differences between some of the real-world assets, tokenizing these assets, and even incorporating digital assets into that?
Yeah, I think that the biggest point that differentiates real-world assets, quote-unquote, tokenized assets from on-chain assets is the fact that real-world assets are tied to a real-world legal structure, and they're enforceable in court. If you have to the point of the last panel, if you have a liquid staking derivatives, you get hacked, you can't necessarily just go to the court and have them undo that transaction and get that money back. It doesn't work that way. It's just all on-chain, and code is law, and that brings a lot of benefits. But there's simply some of the facts that for sophisticated financial instruments in the traditional financial system, you need that sort of permissioning, and you need that sort of ability for legal entities to get involved. And I think that then leads into a whole host of other necessities for the technology, and I think that's the biggest differentiator.
Yeah, I think the real-world RWA really stand for bringing the off-chain asset on-chain, and so because the underlying asset is off-chain, it actually has a few distinctive differences compared to the native asset, yielding asset. I can think of probably three. The first one is the appropriate legal structure, because what makes the RWA valuable is the underlying, right? So people need to know that by tokenizing it, they still have the ownership of the underlying, regardless of what happens. So that means you need to have a proper legal structure that gives the people the confidence that this is 100% bankruptcy remoteness. So this is one unique differentiation from the on-chain native asset. The second one is that because the underlying asset is off-chain, where the token form representation of it is on-chain. So how to establish the relationship to verify that the on-chain asset is always backing the on-chain representation, right? So this is what we mean by establishing the right on-chain transparency. That's actually what Chainlink Proof of Reserve is helping us and the fellow builders doing, is really to establish that relationship dynamically and real time, so that people have the confidence that this is representing the underlying, this much underlying that I own. The third part is on-chain liquidity, which is probably the more difficult part. The native assets, for example, liquid staking derivatives, their underlying is a native asset, so their liquidity is naturally on-chain as well. You just need to wait for the unbound periods, and then you have the liquidity. Whereas for RWA, the underlying is off-chain, right? So which means you take treasury bill, for example, you will have to wait for US open business hours to trade, to dispose or buy the underlying treasury bill. However, when the RWA is tokenized and become an on-chain treasury token and integrated into various DeFi protocols, people expect it to be 24/7, right? They can't just not doing anything during the US closed days, right? Therefore, you have a unique challenge, which is that you have to build on-chain liquidity that support 24/7 trading. So I think that are the three unique challenges we need to address. But if we can address that, this possesses a very big potential for the whole industry to scale.
Absolutely. So I'll keep it going down the line. Erwin, in that same note of answering the title question, like how do we unlock that $100 trillion on chain? How do we turn this interest into massive adoption, and how are you using the Chainlink network to help that?
For sure. And jumping on what Charlie said before, it's true that efficiency, has the potential to bring institutions and quadrillions of dollars on chain. But I would say right now, our focus, at least at Bakkt, is more on giving access to people who don't have. So you can think of populations in Latam, in Southeast Asia, where they don't have, the resource we have. They're not banked like we are, and that has, that is a market that we can serve. And efficiency might come in at a later stage, I feel. That's how I would see it. Then coming back to your question, when you're bringing RWA on chains, there's inherent centralization around it. So we're a company, and that introduces potential risk and trust issues. And that's where working with Chainlink and Proof of Reserve, for example, helps mitigate those risks and provide, trust or a trustless solution to users. And yeah, very fortunate to be working with you guys and yeah, have Proof of Reserve in place so that that everyone can see that we're not minting tokens out of thin air, that there's actually one share for each token that we issue.
Yeah. So back on a high level here on the 100 trillion, it's really not that far off of a guesstimate if you really think about it. Like pretty much all the leading institutions over the last 12 months have published reports projecting 16 trillion or so in the next 10 years of tokenized securities. And from our understanding, these reports are fundamentally looking at the benefits of securitization on chain, which are these 50 basis point improvements, more or less. What they miss, though, in these reports is the significantly large cost savings from liquidity distribution on chain. So in the context of minting stablecoins, in the context of accessing money markets, DEXs, and other sort of applications on chain. We did a research report, we came out with 30 trillion, probably still underestimating what really is going to happen here over the next sort of decade or two. I do think part of the aspect of RWA is really driving utility to these assets, not just holding them on chain. I think everyone on the panel here sort of agrees with that. And so as part of that, really it's a liquidity and distribution infrastructure, right? So part of our strategy at Fortunify, and this is one of the things we're working with Chainlink, is a native cross-chain implementation. So different layer 1s, layer 2s, rollups can have a direct minting experience on their chain, so users can mint natively, they can redeem natively from those chains, and we're looking at CCIP. I think that's a fantastic technology to enable sort of the cross-chain minting and redemption of tokenized securities and stablecoins as well. And also similarly with proof of reserve, sort of providing an additional aspect of transparency around the backing and the stability and custody and sort of the mark-to-market of these underlying assets. So I do really think the work that Chainlink here is doing with CCIP and proof of reserve is sort of foundational and why everyone in RWA is working with them here.
Thanks. Charlie, I see you nodding your head a lot to that. I know you have a bird's eye view of a lot of RWAs. So capitalizing on the question everyone was saying, like, where do you see some of the growth for this 100 trillion or whatever the projections may be?
Yeah, right now it's clear that tokenized treasuries have more or less product market fit on the on-chain ecosystem because after all of the on-chain yield that was token farming and lending and borrowing against other crypto assets, after a lot of that died down when prices went down, you had to have another source of yield or else there was going to be no more yield on chain. And a lot of these folks, a lot of other folks who aren't in this room stepped in to provide the risk-free rate on chain. And from there, you can build all sorts of other financial products, all the DeFi composability, things that we've all experienced over the last few years of innovation. All of those can come to real assets in the way that we all know and love. But I think that what's going to go in the long-term future, I think immediately, stablecoins, of course, will continue to grow. Nick is trying to play a big part in that, and will continue to provide a large amount of liquidity for a lot of the assets in the ecosystem. But to maybe preempting one of the future questions, I do think that it's remain to see what exactly where the most benefit will accrue. We have a lot of partners who think that it'll be things like mortgage securitizations or HELOC securitizations. People like Figure have done $5 billion, $10 billion of securitizations on chain through provenance, and it's their belief that that has completely disrupted traditional financial mortgage securitizations by saving the amount of money that it does, just because of how complex those deals are, how bespoke they can make them for different risk profiles, and how easy that is to all do in the context of DeFi, instead of having to go to 10 different service providers, getting them all to coordinate, and passing spreadsheets back and forth over email with an auditor looking over all of that. You can just do it with smart contracts instead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. I think that's what makes it really disruptive. And I think with that, there comes lots of technical roadblocks and replacing many of those systems. So Cynthia, I'd like to hand it back to you. What are some of the technical roadblocks that you've seen, whether we were saying earlier, like deciding which blockchain to deploy on or replacing some of these systems? What have you seen and how have you helped overcome that?
Yeah, I think the few unique challenges I think we all as builders in this space need to overcome as a whole. The first one is building enough on-chain liquidity so that various use cases can happen around that. It's a little bit chicken and egg question because if you have the use cases, of course, naturally you have the on-chain liquidity, and so it's how at the early stages probably us like being the main liquidity provider, bootstrapping the liquidity so that various applications can take that liquidity and use SCBT and having the liquidity that they require to integrate. So that's one areas that we have seen. The second potential challenges, which I think we'll soon overcome, is really the price oracle, which is also part that we have discussed with the Chainlink price data oracle team, is to find the right methodology to support the real world assets so that the price oracle can be like that. This is a prerequisite that a lot of integration actually needs to rely on. But the price oracle methodology for RWA token might be different from the crypto native token because the underlying has its own value, right? And the underlying asset actually probably have a deeper market liquidity than the on-chain liquidity of it. So what is the right way, what are the right metrics to put into the price methodology? And maybe different application, different lending protocols or trading protocols have their own consideration when it's come to the risk management around the RWA. So they might want to pick and choose the right metrics for them. So maybe for this part, there need to be a more kind of configuration that comes around the price oracle. That's the protocols which is looking to integrate this price oracle can choose and can pick and choose. Yeah, so that's another thing I think would be require a creative solution to bring it to a much wider use case. The third thing is probably the cross-chain liquidity, right? As the tokenized asset become more usable across different chains, the cross-chain capability is definitely required. So I think the CCIP and the proof of reserve and the price oracle are the three very important pillars to support the growth of RWA. So I think a lot of innovative discussion need to happen between the builders and the Chainlink team to pave the way for wider adoption.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you'll hear a lot from Chainlink Labs and through this conference about creating standards. And it's about creating standards for pricing information or proof of reserve information or even cross-chain communication for token passing and arbitrary messaging. And we think that's a large part of overcoming these technical hurdles. So with that, we covered a lot of ground. But something I hear a lot, and I wonder if any of you agree with this, is that a lot of people just say, let's just tokenize everything, right? From stablecoins to, I don't know, your shoes. So I'd love to hear from you guys. Do you think we should tokenize everything? Do you agree or disagree? Or is there something that we haven't talked about that you think is a big use case that no one's talking about? Open floor for everyone who wants to address.
I can start it off. Everyone's looking at me.
Yeah.
How should we answer that one? I think probably one of the bigger, more difficult things to solve, which is like a ginormous opportunity, is private credit. Public debt, treasuries, stocks, things that have a price feed and an API are generally pretty straightforward to bring on chain and validate, the pricing and all of that. It's a pretty well built out infrastructure. The private debt side, though, is much more fragmented. It's less imperfect data. And building a mechanism that can kind of support and scale private credit, shorter duration private credit. I don't believe in tokenizing everything. I don't think 30-year mortgages will ever work on chain. None of these chains have been around for 30 years. So, but shorter duration private credit that has a very inefficient capital markets off-chain, paired with highly efficient on-chain liquidity, is sort of an explosion for success there. I think we just need protocols that can actually manage less liquid RWAs, which is something we're working on. I think it'll be fundamental for stablecoins. I think money markets will start to adopt these as well. But there's a pretty large opportunity there as well. So no, not everything, but where there's demand, it will come on chain.
Great. Speaking of where there is demand, Erwin, I know that you've been working with equities. What else have you seen as far as demand-wise? Because I think there's B assets for stocks as well. We'd love to hear your perspective there.
Yeah, so we've built a pretty scalable platform, and we can tokenize pretty much anything that is traded on an exchange, on the LSE or New York Stock Exchange, for example. But right now, we're pretty much just seeing demand, or the bulk of the demand is for fixed income. And I would assume that this is here to stay. When you look at the traditional finance, fixed income is probably 50%, more than that. But it's the bulk of the market, and I would assume that we see the same in Web3. So yeah, we've got a bunch of products, and our most successful one right now is the US T-bill. Probably second one is the equivalent, but for euros. And we'll keep adding more fixed income products, maybe go out on the duration and have different types of issues like corporates. I think we'll stick to public assets for now. I wonder, I think I can very much see private debt, common chain, and for blockchains to really bring efficiency and savings to those markets. But I just wonder, when you look at the history, I mean, the first tokenized asset that achieved scale is the US dollar. Now we're seeing the US T-bills. I just wonder whether private credit is the third one, or it's a bit further out. It's a question.
Yeah, I don't think it's like the short-term opportunity. I think it's sort of like the medium-term opportunity before like the longer-term one. I think obviously the most liquid things that people can get in and out of daily or close to it, are going to be the most easily adoptable, especially as people start getting used to it. It's a much easier collateral type. It's less volatile. It's a pretty straightforward product. Most like applications on chain are built for like liquid assets. They don't really have a mechanism to lock up duration. So I totally agree with you. I think stocks are going to be utilized. We can start adding them to perp markets and doing all sorts of creative things there. But I do think like as the infrastructure improves, nominally stable coins, as those infrastructures improve, I think private credit sort of becomes a pretty large opportunity there.
And to further back up Nick's point, when we talk to a lot of institutions that use our data, a lot of them, they always point to the same things, and that most of them are in private markets because they see the issues with lack of liquidity in private markets all the time. If you go to someone who has a stake in a PE firm like KKR, let's say they want to sell that to their buddy, how do they do it? It's an enormously complicated and costly process that can't be done today. But if you bring that on chain, that is a costly process in and of itself, but once it's done once, it's very easy to transfer that, make a market in it. And so everyone points to fund stakes, other types of funds that are very liquid. Private credit is a very big one, private equity as well. Overall, just you can even see a lot of the papers that people cite for tokenization in TradFi is all transforming private markets, and that they see that as the main opportunity. But that's underscored by the fact that everything has been done with public assets so far, just because it is a lot easier and does have a lot of product market fit in the current DeFi ecosystem. Yeah.
Other than public and private credit, we think a lot about what would be the next to tokenize, even though we might not in a hurry to push a lot of product out of the door. But I think generally we believe there's a huge opportunity or enhancement of efficiency when we tokenize alternative investment assets, because you help greatly lower the cost of origination and circulation, and also you greatly bring more equitable access to it, right? So I think in that dimension, we can think of precious metals, we can think of property markets in the prime locations, in the prime cities of the world. We can think of fine wines and even some collectibles. Those would be interesting assets to be seen tokenized in the near future.
All right. Well, we're at time already. I can't believe it. So everyone, thanks for joining, and stay tuned for all the great stuff these guys are producing. So thanks again.
Thank you.